Hello, welcome back to another episode of Somewhere Between a Film and TV podcast. I am your host, Daniel Parra. Number one, thank you so much for listening and watching. Number two, if you could, please like, comment, and subscribe down below. Guys, the reason why I'm talking so seriously is we got to talk about the most serious movie of the year, The Naked Gun, 2025, directed by Akiva Schaffer, starring Liam Neeson as the son of Frank Drebin, formerly played by Leslie Nielsen. And again, remember, everything we review will always have full spoilers here, which is kind of hilarious because it's The Naked Gun, right? But I want to get into some of the jokes specifically. Let's go ahead and get right into it. With this movie, I want to ask you guys, did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? Let me know down below. As for myself, guys, oh my god, it's been so long since there's been a genuine comedy, just jokes, not trying to teach you a lesson. I couldn't possibly think of what the lesson would be here, about just trying to make you laugh, really, for, I was gonna say 90 minutes, but this movie's like an hour 25. This very much is, it's more than an homage to Leslie Nielsen and Airplane and the former likes of, I would even say stuff like Spaceballs, Airplane, of course, Top Secret. And really, let's get into the history of parody movies really quick, because I want to tell you guys right off the bat, loved this movie a lot. I think it was so great and it was so funny. And I'm a person, part of my humor was really formulated and based off of Lonely Island when I was in middle school. And you gotta admit it, everybody kind of had their phase of Seth MacFarlane's work in, so work so seriously, like Family Guy, American Dad, Ted. And obviously, what they're doing here is it's kind of a fuse of their style of humor and a fuse of the older, I can never remember the full name, but Zucker and that team of people. And what ended up happening for a while there is, if we're going to track the sort of escalation, or let's, call it the opposite, or there's a funny joke about that in this, where it's like calm people up instead of turning people down. But if we're going to talk about the digressing of parody movies, what happened was, I think that in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of great stuff. Mel Brooks and, the Frankenstein parody and Spaceballs again and all that stuff was so great. It was so funny. And then the late 90s, I think that not another teen movie's great. I think that I guess they're kind of parody movies. They are. Austin Powers, which this one has a joke that kind of borrows from it pretty heavily, but Austin Powers. And then kind of my enemy a little bit. I think the first two are okay, are the Scary Movie movies. I think that they are sort of, like, don't get me wrong, I think that the Wayans are definitely talented to an extent, but I hate them. I hate that, not the people, but I hate the movies. I hate the movies a lot, actually. I genuinely think that they are the initiation for the decline of parody movies. It seemed to be a lost art for a solid 15 years, and it was crazy. And what ended up happening was then really the nail in the coffin. I think superhero movies kind of funny, but the nail in the coffin was what's their names? I think it's Seltzer and Freeberg. And I'm going to apologize to my dad for making him going and seeing Epic Movie back when that came out in, I think, 2005 or something like that. I saw that again as an adult. That is one of the worst movies ever made. Disaster Movie is one of the worst movies ever made. Twilight, vampires suck. Genuinely. You know how when you're a kid, you start to piece together, oh, movies can be bad. Vampires Suck was one of the ones where I saw it at home and I was just like, oh my god, this is maybe the worst thing I've ever seen. And then it was just this constant tumble. Basically, how in Hot Rod, when Andy Samberg just falls down the hill over and over and over and over, felt just like that. And I remember where I drew the line was with the Starving Games, which is a parody of the Hunger Games, and nothing works. And part of the reason why is because for a while there, they sort of thought that references or things just kind of existing is why something would be funny. And it ended up being more about pop culture than it did about just sort of trying to get a joke being funny in a movie. And so, as simple as it might seem, I do think that spoof movies are hard to do, and I think that parody movies are just so difficult. I'm not susceptible to just a reference, essentially. Like which one is it? Is it Jessica Simpson? Someone is in one of I think it's Meet the Spartans, and there's just references that are so random to like nothing, and then you can tell that they're either improvising or they got a lot of budget costumes for like $10. I think Epic Movie has a scene where Nacho Libre is involved for some reason, but it's not actually Nacho Libre. There's no sort of, evaluation or analysis or play on the movie existing other than just that we have the costume that vaguely resembles it, and let's go ahead and just reference it, and that's it. So I genuinely, with this movie, I want to tell you guys what the plot is, but I want to tell you something that I haven't been used to in quite a long time, because comedies don't come out in theaters anymore, and it's been driving me crazy. I know that I didn't review it, but I reviewed it on TikTok. Happy Gilmore 2 I liked, but I do think really any sort of comedy, even if it's okay, will benefit from being seen in a theater because it's a communal experience. It's a community thing. I saw this movie with, very happy about this, a packed and sold out crowd, and it was awesome. I actually genuinely couldn't hear, I would say about 20 to 30% of the dialogue because of how loud people were laughing. It's one of those things where I kind of feel like I have to see it again because there's so many random things happening every 20 seconds. This is very much we must have a joke every 20 to 30 seconds. It doesn't matter if it doesn't land. It doesn't matter if it's funny to someone and funny to someone else. We're going to benefit from that fact because everyone's taste in humor is subjective. I will give you an actual genuine example. I saw of this firsthand. The guy to my left was laughing hysterically at everything, and I mean everything. Like, I think that this guy thought, I don't know, like he'd never heard a joke before maybe, but he had the time of his life. And then the guy to my right didn't laugh at all. Not a single moment. And it was so weird because like there was actually once, and it was one of the jokes I thought was like okay, and that he busted out laughing. He got one out of him. So that was just sort of a funny experience. As for me, about 90% of them worked for me. And there were some, though, that are genuinely some of the funniest things I feel like I've ever heard. There's a line early on in which Liam Neeson describes Pamela Anderson, and it's one of the funniest lines of dialogue I think I've heard in a comedy. But if we're to try to break down the plot, basically, which, why, Frank Drebin is part of the police squad, and he has to figure out this sort of conspiracy going on with this tech billionaire who sells electric cars. Sound familiar? It's kind of topical, but also not at all. But ends up trying to figure out what he's behind, and it sort of kinds of being like this noir investigation. And there's a really funny early on joke where it turns out every single cop in the precinct has their internal noir monologue going on at the same time, because it cuts to Paul Walter Hauser, and then he's also having a monologue about Pamela Anderson. This is actually the joke I didn't hear, is that it cuts to the entire police squad staring at Pamela Anderson, and they're all going through this like monologue about her in their head, and it made me bust out laughing so hard. This movie really... Roger Ebert, I think I heard this and also read this a long time ago, said that these movies are unreviewable because, I mean, you're trying to critique a movie that's not even trying to present itself as something that could have plot holes. And if it does, it'll probably even call it out itself and make fun of it. Like, why does Liam Neeson accept a car from the villain and just use it the entire movie? And it's never once mentioned until he ends up being in this chase with, not even a chase, he ends up being stuck in the car locked with himself, where it's going to veer off into the ocean, and there's all these sight gags that are preventing him from getting out of the car. One that I thought was so funny is because he gets stuck with balloons and bees in his car, and then he kicks out the windshield, and it ends up being another windshield that's replaced right off of it. And that's the type of logic that we're operating on here. And I love the sort of physical comedy that's involved here, but there's a lot of visual gags as well. One of my favorite ones, and you can even see it coming sometimes, is early on you see a crane being lowered down because they're bringing the crane to take this car up, and it ends up being this machine crane that you would use for like the stuffed animals at an arcade or something. And it was so funny, and the actual visual of them committing to it, which is what I want to talk about. I want to state that I saw that Jim Henson's Puppeteer Shop was involved in the credits as well, because there's a non sequitur about a snowman. And I want to lay this out for you if you haven't seen it, but I do think it's really well worth your time. And remember, jokes involve the element of surprise, so don't ruin it for yourself if you really want to see this. And what ends up happening is Pamela Anderson and Liam Neeson, and they're dating now, which I think is, that's amazing. That I think they must have met on this, but they do have pretty good chemistry with each other, all things considered. And her comedic timing is amazing, by the way. She's brilliant in this. She ends up being just on par with Liam Neeson, which is another thing I want to talk about in a second. But what ends up happening is it's this sort of like play on a dream sequence where they're envisioning their future together, but they build a snowman, and then they start doing these chanting incantations to bring the snowman to life. But then it quickly turns into this kind of like horror survivor thing where the snowman starts chasing them around because he feels like he's not involved in their relationship anymore. So he starts spraying out all of the air, whatever it's called, from Liam Neeson's inhaler, and ends up chasing them with a gun around the place, but they end up killing him with a hot tub, basically. And then it'll just cut to the next scene. And very much, I saw this comparison already, but it very much did feel like this. I am a huge SNL and Lonely Island specifically fan. And it felt very much like Lonely Island's old YouTube shorts and their digital shorts. All that was really needed here was just an extended song, which there is in the credits, but I mean like an extended song that would have felt like it would have probably led into a song if Andy Samberg was in it, which I saw that he was a voice in it, but this is directed by Akiva Schaffer, who's a part of that as well. And it's not like there's necessarily anything to critique just in terms of plot or anything, because like what could I possibly say that I thought that what makes it work so well is there's so many jokes, so many, and I mean so many. But Liam Neeson, and I want to touch on his performance, because Leslie Nielsen, back in before all of the satire movies, all the spoof movies, was a serious actor. And now we have a very serious actor. Liam Neeson, I think the last time he was in a comedy was Ted 2. He was also kind of doing a character like this where he was definitely more his Taken persona than he was just Liam Neeson. And the reason why that works so well is when I see Liam Neeson, I associate him with what he's been doing for the past 10 years, where he's in Taken 3, which is horrible. Taken 2, he's in, I can always call it The Commuter. What is it called? Where he's like on a train and he beats people up. That one with Vera Farmiga. And it's gotten to a point with him where you're like, man, I love Liam Neeson, don't get me wrong, but he's older, and you're kind of like, that's why Taken 3 has that shot, like the 20 cuts where it's like, okay, that's obviously a stunt double. Like, what are we doing? Why are we still doing this? And it's like him playing a character that he's not really anymore. And yet, then in this, there's a joke that kind of feels self-reflective in that early on he's in a fight scene, but he barely moves. He kind of just starts slapping the person back and forth, and he's doing these karate moves, but he's standing still. And the person's the one moving around, and they end up kind of doing this like handshake thing with each other. It ends up being a silly joke, and I thought it was funny. But the actual physicality before that, where it looks like he's barely trying, but he's still handling the person so well, was hilarious. And I felt like that was a weird sort of maybe self-reflective joke about how those later on action movies of his ended up going, because they ended up just kind of being passable, whatever. Like, I think one of them, was he in the one that was like the Simpsons snowplow thing, basically, that seemed a lot like that. Either way, casting Liam Neeson is very obviously a kind of just on the nose casting. And I remember seeing the trailer and being like, I think I get what they're doing. Is the world around them going to be really self-serious, or is it going to be like really silly? But this is very serious to them, and that's exactly what ends up happening. Liam Neeson is not doing anything with a wink and a nod. He's doing everything incredibly straight-faced, and that's what makes his performance so much funnier, is that he's taking any conflict and any joke and opportunity presented to him deadly seriously. But he's also saying insanely silly things, but it's very important to this world contextually and how it works. And I don't think a lot of people are really doing delivery like with a wink and a nod. Sometimes that can be a detriment to a movie like this, where the world itself is a little bit too self-aware of what it's doing just in terms of being silly. Instead, what they do is, I saw that they got Brandon Trost to be the director of photography on this, and I genuinely thought that it was shot like a crime precinct thing, and that added to kind of the scope of everything. Because it could have definitely been, flat and whatever, and it probably would have been fine. People wouldn't have really called it out, because people tend to be more lenient on comedies whenever they're not, amazingly shot. But this ended up being part of that in a positive way, where it's really well shot and it looks like the movies that it's spoofing. And there's one scene that is so obviously a parody. There's not very many direct movie references. There's one, though, that is so clearly Mission Impossible 6. And it was so funny, where they just keep going this upper chain of command about who's like reporting to who, about who's arresting the other person. And there's so many sight gags like that in this. One of my favorite ones is they have to go to something called the WWFC fight, which is like a mixture of WWE and UFC. And it's sponsored by NPR. And that was so funny because it's just on the Octagon thing. But the movie never calls attention to running jokes or sight gags like that. That could be a kind of crutch you could use if you didn't trust the audience to get in on the joke. But there's so many that you could also miss. I'm sure I missed a couple. There's one that I almost did, and I can't even blank on it. There's so many in this that it's even hard to remember every single one of them. But there's just such a dedication to all of them in the background, and then there's also ones in the forefront. There's this ongoing joke that at first you're kind of like, okay, they've done it like three times, but it gets so outlandishly silly, where I'm really curious how much 7-Eleven paid for promotion for just promoting this movie. And there's this constant ongoing bit where they keep having coffee handed to them, but even if they just got handed one, they will get handed another one, but they never directly state it out. They never call it out. And my favorite one was one that was followed up on later, where he's driving straight, and there's no way that this could have possibly happened, but the car, the passenger, or the window gets pulled down, and then somebody just hands him another cup of coffee out of nowhere, and it's just so silly that you can't help but laugh out loud at it. But that's the sort of dedication to a movie like this. And I think what separates it, I'm sure other people have said this, the scary movies and the haunted house movies, I hate them. I hate them a lot, to be entirely honest with you. I know some people are fans of them, but those haunted house movies specifically are the bane of my existence. I hate when movies are comedies and they just don't land a single joke, because you're like, come on, you gotta at least one has to have worked, right? But no. And so I want to say that I think those movies operate in the realm of stupidity. Is it possible to make stupid funny? Yes, I think so. But they're too on the nose to their own detriment that they are constantly aware of what they're parodying, that it just never works. Here, this is silly. And I think it's possible to make silly work very well compared to something being stupid. And that's sort of just vocabulary difference, whatever. But if we were to get into any kind of negatives, because let's be honest, I mean, I think that there's just less to say here than there is about other stuff, but I think that this movie's brilliant just anyway. It's just one of those things where it's very visual based, so you kind of have to go in and see it for yourself. I think that overall it works incredibly well. The negatives are that 10% of the jokes don't work, but that's okay. Would I see another one of these? 100%. Would I see like 4 more of these? Yes. Just keep them coming, make them funny, and that's like really all I need. I'm very, very susceptible to dad humor though as well. There's so many jokes like that as well. There's one that I busted out laughing at where it says cops in hot water and they're in the front of the newspaper and they're in a hot tub. That's hilarious. But I'm going to give this a ridiculously high score if I'm being honest with you because of what it set out to do. And what it set out to do is be there's even a joke about this early on where he says, hopefully we can match the original, the greatness, but also be brand new in our own way. And you know what? That's exactly what they do. I haven't seen any of the older ones in forever. The last movie I saw that was like this was like Hot Shots Part 2. But that movie's amazing, by the way. But yeah, I set out to make you laugh. Thought it was amazing. I thought it was so funny. And try and see it with a packed crowd if you can. But then also it's one of those things where I kind of want to see it at home too, to get that experience out of it as well. And yeah, if you ever heard people say they don't make movies like this anymore, well, this exists. And there's also some jokes in it that people would say, oh, they can't make jokes like that. Well, they do. They do it anyway. There's a couple of things here that you're like, wow, people can still say stuff like that. And I thought overall it was amazing. It's one of the funniest comedies I have seen in quite a while. I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. I loved this movie. I really, really did. It's one of my favorite movies of the year so far. And I could have taken a little bit more of it, but it's also perfect for its runtime. I think that if it were gone on any longer, it would have been one of those things where you critique, well, it's a little too long, because a movie like this definitely needs to get in, get out, and you're good. But yeah, I had a great time with this. I loved it so much, if I'm being honest. It's so good. It's impressive how good it is, really. But again, what did you guys think of The Naked Gun? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? I want to know. And coming up next, make sure you're subscribed for this. I'm so beyond excited for this movie. I've actually intentionally gone out of my way to not see any trailers for it. Is Weapons by... always forget his name. But the guy who did Barbarian, which is one of my favorite horror movies like the past 10 years. I am beyond excited for that movie. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to have a full breakdown, analysis, review, all that stuff. But again, thank you guys so much for listening and watching. I'll see you next time.